They said, here's some tips for succeeding in the film industry. Don't be late. Don't talk back. Don't be gay. So this was 2009. And I remember thinking to myself, well, it's a good thing that was just a phase then.
Hello, welcome back to Misty Fox. I'm Juniper Fox, and I have been just having the most amazing experience in Vancouver, going to film school and meeting incredible people. I have with me Julian, my lovely friend from school, and Mikah, who I've just met, and you won't believe the guest I've gotten on this channel today. So please enjoy our kind of sit-down discussion about what it's like to be trans in the film industry, both independent and industry.
Welcome. I'm excited.
Let's get into it.
We are joined today by a truly inspiring individual and cinematographer whose work has helped shape the visual language of modern comic book television, Mikah Sharkey, DOP, and Cam Up, and a bunch of different other roles and a bunch of different shows like The Flash. Pioneer, opening doors for women and especially transgender women working behind the camera in big productions. We are so honored to have her with us to talk about her journey and the power of visibility in the film industry. And just before we dive in, I wanted to introduce my wonderful friend here, Juniper Fox, talented and passionate filmmaker and fellow Vancouver film student, who was bold enough to talk to Mikah and actually convince her to talk with us today. So,
Arm was twisted, I'll tell you that.
I wonder if you want to introduce yourself as well, maybe, or if it's okay, we can jump right with the questions.
You can introduce yourself.
My name is Julian Romero. I'm also a Vancouver film student, and I'm gonna be the interviewer today. So I'm actually very nervous, but I want to try to do my best. So, first question before we jump into all of those iconic projects that you've worked on, I would love to start by learning a little bit more about your background. So, do you remember what that first experience behind the camera on an actual role was for you, and what was your first job actually?
Yeah, my first experience in film actually was kind of outside the film industry. Like, I started by shooting for a hockey school. At the time, I was in high school, and I was working for a goaltending school called Golden the Net. And they were looking to expand their roster of, like, services they offered. They wanted to create, like, corporate videos for their sister companies and stuff like that. So, like, I'm a teenager. I had just done, like, film in, like, high school and stuff like that, and the CEO of this company is like, hey, come operate a camera for me and shoot this video. And I'm like, hell yeah. So, like, I don't even want to show it because it's so, like, I hate looking at it. It was like they shoved me onto, like, this set with, like, a couple of dudes, this rickety jib arm, and, like, this, like, 2005, like, point and shoot Sony camera. And I'm like, okay, fuck, what am I doing? And I, like, kind of hobbled my way through my first project. But that was the first thing I ever shot. And from there, we did a couple projects together, and having that experience and getting a bursary with that company is what got me into film school.
Was your first role the first CC or the camera or what was your first role?
The very first thing that I did on, like, a real production, I'll say with air quotes, was I got into the camera training program in 2009. And as a camera trainee, I was on the second unit of a movie starring Owen Wilson called Marmaduke. It was like a talking dog movie. And so to go from shooting corporate video and film school projects to doing, like, being on this big set where, like, you have these full-size film cameras on, like, large techno cranes and stuff like that was, like, a little bit mind-blowing for me when I was in my early 20s.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I would like to know, since you start working in different big shows and different big productions, how was this, like, how would you describe the experiences of becoming and going through all of those roles for someone that doesn't really understand what the film industry is like?
How would I pitch my journey through the camera department to an outsider?
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
Uh,
Film is such a unconventional industry. Like, there's no point where someone takes you aside and says, like, I think we're going to promote you or anything like that. You kind of have to prove your worthiness in multiple positions as you rise through the ranks. And depending on the crews you're working with, you also have to delicately manage other people's egos, because there are unfortunately people out there who will see you as a skilled individual, and they will not like that because they see that their own job is under threat. Um, so it's a weird and delicate balance, because, and not everyone's like that. Of course, there are great people who are like absolutely going to be the first people that call you once you like actually get you into the union or what have you. So in the camera trainee program, you have to do several rotations with different camera crews and accrue your days so that you can upgrade to be a second AC in the union. Um, and then once you upgrade, like, you're on your own. After that, the union will give you rotations, but they won't help you out after that. It's an industry that is based entirely on your own reputation and like what skills you've done. So when I upgraded, I put my name on the day call list and I started getting calls, which was lucky for me. Well, I say lucky, but it was busy enough that people were willing to reach out and give me that chance, and I kind of had to take it. So yeah, you kind of have to find your own way, and it's something that's really rewarding, and it's something that's also really terrifying at the same time.
yeah. In your own experience, is there anything that resonates with your own um, experiences so far about how it can be threatening a little bit? Um,
Yeah, I think in like broad strokes for film, it's very similar, even if like on an individual level. I mean, I'm still in film school, and I've haven't had the experience of getting paid for like set work, but at the same time, even what I have done is so opportunity based. It's so like putting yourself out there, even for things that you think are way out of your league or way that you are not sure you'd ever get in the first spot. And you just have to continually like prove yourself and be always learning and like open minded to expanding your skill set. And eventually, you know, whether it's by your teachers or whether in my case it's like people who make fan films and whatnot, they keep kind of inviting you back or recommending you to other people so you can keep getting that experience and growing.
I think there's something really to be said about that, and like in the industry, because what we do sometimes is so difficult with long hours and nights and harsh conditions and stuff like that. I think that there's something really to be said about like, it's not always the person who is like the greatest technically at their position who necessarily is the first one that I want to call, because film is such an artistic endeavor that there's a lot of wiggle room for compromise and for improvisation, as evidenced if you could see our camera setup right now. There's a lot of improvisation going on. And I would honestly rather work with someone who I get along with and who brings a good energy to the set, more than someone who is like the absolute greatest, but is just an absolute black hole of misery that brings everybody down during a 15-hour day. I think there is really something to be said about that.
yeah. So since we are both film school students, we're getting taught a bunch of different, I guess I would call mindsets on how to behave on set, on the things to do. I say, I think that they are teaching us that we should be very professional in so many different levels, and I think that's very good. Um, Perhaps the only thing I disagree with is the way we are kind of taught into being afraid of our mistakes, because they're telling us that maybe we shouldn't be we should be working more like a machine inside feels in a way that the film industry, it's made for people that are not human beings, perhaps, maybe in a way, which I know sounds kind of ridiculous, but that's kind of the mindset that we're going for. And I don't know how you've been feeling about this, but maybe it could be good to know the perspective of someone that's already struggling with a bunch of different aspects, and adding that into the stress that it is becoming a film student or an aspiring filmmaker. What would you say is one of the things that you've been struggling with, understanding how the film industry is?
Yeah, I certainly feel that. Like, in school, there is kind of, I think there's two layers to it, because there's what you see on the surface and the kind of pressure they put on you, where it's like studio shoots, you gotta get everything right, you gotta not mess up at all, and we're like watching and grading everything. But then you take instructors aside and kind of talk about it, and they're like, no, I completely messed up studio shoots and I failed in all of these different ways, but I'm so glad I did, because then I wouldn't fail in that same way in the industry when it really matters. And that's kind of, I think, generously like what they're trying to prepare us for is just, it may seem like we can't make mistakes, but really this is the time to make as many mistakes as fast as possible so that we learn that. But then at the same time, like, mental pressure, it is a lot. Like, and knowing, having some experience in film generally before this, and knowing pretty realistically what the film industry is like, having no kind of naivete about that, is like, yeah, that's it is brutal, and it is seems fairly unforgiving, and that's something that, I think a lot of the pressure on myself is just kind of internal, though. Like, I feel like I have to be the best in school, or else I'm not gonna make it anywhere, and that's maybe not necessarily the case.
I wanted to expand on that a little bit, because I think that there is definitely times in film where you do have to be perfect. Like, for instance, if there's a stunt going on that you have one shot at, and you're the person who didn't put the camera settings right before you shot, and you find out afterwards, you're not getting called back. However, I think as a creative, and one of the things I learned, especially as I got higher in the ranks, is that sometimes there are just tough decisions that you have to make and you have to live with. And I think the best example of that I can give from my own experience is, like, in the season finale of The Flash season 8, there's a scene that is going to haunt me forever. And the reason for that is we had so little time to shoot it. We had set up, it was this big finale between the Flash and the Reverse Flash. And we were going to be downtown all night. We had a whole day to shoot this one scene. And it was like, it's this big battle, right? It's supposed to be, this is 8 seasons coming. It's this huge moment between these two characters. And I was really taking that seriously. And, of course, that night was a flash thunderstorm. And not like the Flash. I mean, it was on us. We didn't expect it. My key rigging grip came up to me during the night, and he said, the winds are too high. We can't have lifts in the air. Can we bring them down? And I'm sitting there knowing that all the producers in LA are in bed. And I'm the one who has to make this decision. And that if we have a lightning strike in the area, and I've got guys in the lifts, and if I say to them, you stay in those goddamn lifts because we have to get this shot, what does that look like for me?
Right.
I want to put my people first, their safety first. If anything were to happen to them, I would not want to live with that. I would much rather live with what ended up happening was we had to rush through that scene in about 2 hours because the rainstorm was on us and we lost about 4 hours of shoot. And so suddenly we're rushing through this incredibly important scene because the sun is going to be coming up soon. But I would much rather live with an underwhelming shot on the reverse flash as he floats in the air than I would with any of the consequences that would have come from making my people work through those conditions. So you're right that sometimes there are things that are very important that you have to get right. And for instance, like in terms of on-set etiquette and stuff like that, when first team is on set and first team is a name that you know, like a famous person, everyone shuts the entire fuck up. Can I say that? Can I say fuck?
Sure.
Okay, great. Everyone shuts the entire fuck up out of respect for those cast members. But, you know, when the cast aren't around and you're setting up, yeah, there's a little bit more leeway.
Right.
But yeah, those are things that you learn with experience.
Did you go to film school?
I did go to film school. I went to BCIT back in 2007/8, or was it 8/9? 7/8. And that was at a film course called Film Flex, which doesn't exist anymore, which was a 1-year intensive course.
So was the experience a little bit the same for you during film school? Stressful and a bunch of different mindsets that they were telling you about how making mistakes would cost the rest of your life.
I don't think anything that dire.
Right.
I think that our film program was a little bit more geared towards independent filmmakers. And so not working on big sets, working with your own projects and that sort of thing. Which is funny and ironic that I got into the big budget projects because of my cinematography instructor there. He was on the board for ICG 669 and put my name in put his name on my reference letter.
We're gonna jump back into the ICD 669 in a minute, but first I would like to know how did you get to work in the Flash in the first place?
So I first worked on the Flash in season 4. And the reason that I got onto that is just like, it's such a convoluted story, and it's all about networking, but the very short version of it is back in 2010, I had jumped on a TV series that a friend of mine had left because I was a trainee on that series, and when he left, the focus puller that he was working for wanted me to work for him, and so I became that guy's second AC for several years until he left the industry, and then I became the first AC on a TV show in his place. In 2010, though, we were working with an individual known as Ted Smith, who is one of the best focus pullers in town. He would come out and work with us on a TV series called Human Target. That was back in 2010. When I was then day calling as a first AC on The Flash, which was his show, he decided to have me out to have me do their C camera days. So that was how I first started doing Flash. I didn't do full time. I was busy with other projects and other series until season 7, actually, because of COVID. A bunch of projects that I was going to be a part of got delayed, and The Flash was the first one to start shooting and the first one to call me. So that's how I ended up on The Flash.
And you also work as the DOP for The Flash.
Yeah, so that's so here's another weird story. In season 7, I was talking to the DP and during one rainy, horrible night, and I was telling him some story about some short film that I had shot, and he said to me, "Oh, you like shooting?" I said, "Yeah, that's what I want to do. I want a DP." And he goes, "Okay, I have this short film for one of the cast members that I'm already booked for, but I'm double booked. I've booked myself too much. Can you do that?" And I'm like, "Hell yeah." So, cut to, I teamed up with one of the lighting guys from The Flash who was going to be my gaffer, and I ended up shooting this short film for Kayla Compton, and she used that short. It was called In Training. She used that short to get into Warner Brothers' directing program. And so at the end of season 7, when that DP quit the show, my work was already in front of the executives when season 8 came around. So I was the first AC, and in the first day of prep, they came up to me. They said, "Hey, guess what? You're going to be the second unit DOP for season 8. And I was like floored. I'm like, holy shit, this is crazy. And I like kind of had to sit down for a sec. The first 5 episodes were for their an arc called Armageddon, because every year the Flash or like the CW Arrowverse always did a crossover event.
Yeah.
And they claimed this one wasn't a crossover because other shows were ending, but it was a crossover. And it was Armageddon. So during Armageddon, I was doing the second unit. And then they were originally going to have the other DP shoot every single episode for the entire season, all 20 episodes.
Right.
By the end of the Armageddon arc, which was 5 episodes, that guy looked like he was about to die. So he looked exhausted. So I said to the producers, hey, I want to shoot an episode. Brenton can have an episode off. I know that episode 6 is with non-main characters because Grant was taking an episode off himself. So the stakes were pretty low. I'm like, let me shoot this one. And they agreed, and they gave me the, oh, kid, it's a big show, don't fuck it up, Todd. So I shot the episode, and the next one after that was going to be the 8th episode, because we would do 6, and then I would prep for... Brendan would come back for episode 7, he would prep during episode 6, do episode 7, then I would do episode 8. And we had the same director, so I called in on the last day of shooting on episode 6, and I said... So, should I go back on to the crew for the next episode? Or he goes, or should I think I asked specifically, should I put my order in for lunch at the office for prep? And he goes, yeah, put your lunch in. Click. Great, okay, I'm doing the next episode. Awesome. So, I did the next episode, and then same thing, like end of episode 8, I call the office. So should I put my order in for lunch for the next episode? Yes, and stop asking. Click. Which meant I was the even episode DP for The Flash.
You became the first openly transgender member of the ICD Local 669. What did it feel like the day you officially joined the union, knowing you changed what was possible for others?
Yeah. So I didn't join the union when I was already out. I came out of the closet in 2013 and I joined the union in 2010. When I joined the union, I remember doing a day in the trainee class where the person who was presenting, they said, here's some hot tips for succeeding in the film industry. Don't be late. Don't talk back. Don't be gay. So this was 2010. Yeah. Or sorry, 2009, I guess is... Yeah, because I upgraded in 2010. So this was 2009. And I remember thinking to myself, well, it's a good thing that was just a phase then. I was really in denial in my early 20s. And especially back then, like, I think the only representation that I had seen for trans people at all was like some horrible TLC reality show that was like, my husband is becoming my wife or something scandalous like that. And it was awful. And so I was like, so like just pent up, and I really, really, really did not want that to be me. And unfortunately, those feelings don't go away. They don't. And the more you try to repress them, the worse they get. And like, so I did a couple of years being a camera assistant, working on, you know, really tough shows. I kind of had a reputation for working with like sort of the toughest guys, like the sort of most difficult people to work for, because they were like very, very technically good and did the big shows. And it was really stressful. I did a TV series as a second AC where we did 18-hour days every single day. We did 9 hours before lunch and 9 hours after lunch every single day. And because it was an action television show, a lot of the times we were up in the mountains, out in the woods, out in the rain, and gravel quarries and stuff like that. Like, it was really hard. And like, part of me loved it for that, because I was like, well, no trans person would be this tough. And And so it was kind of easy for me to look the other way for a while and really put myself into my work. But as I sort of got used to the industry and used to my position, there was something kind of gnawing at the back of my cerebellum, right? Something that was like just not going away. And for at least a year, I think I was on a really, really self-destructive spiral where I was just making a lot of really bad decisions, and it was really, really getting to me. And this was around the time of Save BC Film.
What is Save BC Film? Yeah, for people who don't know.
Oh yeah. So for people who don't know, in around 2013, I don't remember the exact timeline, the Christy Clark government decided that they didn't want to give American productions the BC tax credit anymore. And so they stopped providing the BC tax credit for productions from LA. And that basically immediately shut down our industry because we, being in the same time zone as LA, BC has always relied on LA for work. Some people will joke that we're just a LA service industry. And so we don't get a lot of money from Ontario to come over here because a lot of our crews are already and producers are already tied up with LA productions. So when the LA money stopped, a lot of BC just shut down. And we saw the same thing with the strike. So it was around Save BC Film. And that's, in hindsight, it's probably the reason why, because I had more time to actually think. And I came to the realization that if I didn't live as my authentic self, I wasn't going to live much longer. And I was lucky enough that I took a bit of a hiatus from film. And it actually ended up working at a deli at the Urban Fair on Davie Street for a few months. I think I ran into one producer down there, and I like pretended not to know him. I hoped he didn't recognize me. Well, I sort of took time away from film because it was such a different vibe on set back then. Like especially in the camera department, it was very, very homophobic, and I remember thinking to myself that I was going to have to like leave the province, and I thought that I was going to have to go to Toronto and like go under a different name and just sort of hope that everyone here had forgotten about me. But an opportunity came up working for someone who kind of does smaller scale projects. And I got back into that and I enjoyed the work that I was doing, and I was at the time still able to sort of hide the developments that were happening. The developments that were happening. And I got swept up in a couple of smaller productions, and then eventually I ended up on a TV series called When Calls the Heart, which is still shooting to this day. It's in its like 12th or 13th season or something like that. And that was the show I ended up coming out of the closet on. And what happened there was that word gets around fast in the film industry because it's a small industry. It's a big small industry. And so people had seen me on the weekends. So even though I was in my boy mode on set, people had seen me on the weekends. And so the fella who I had been working for, who I'd worked for as his sort of, he had been mentoring me for like the better part of 7 years, who was a staunchly Christian man. And he took me aside one day and asked me what was going on with me. And I told him, and he said something to the tune of like, "You're comfortable dressing like that in public?" And I'm like, oh my God. And it was a weird uphill battle during that season of television because like it felt like the camera crew, because they were so insulated and so sort of used to this machismo sort of atmosphere, that I think at the beginning it felt like that they thought that I had failed as a man and so therefore had to live as a woman. Which is like such a backwards way of looking at things. Have you run into anything like that?
Maybe from my parents, but not really like, no one said that to me. just like that might be part of my internal struggle of like, oh, am I just like this because of whatever my terrible experience as a man or whatnot? But no.
Well, good. I'm lucky. I'm glad that you don't feel that way. Because I remember at the time I like really busted my ass and like really felt like I had to work twice as hard as everyone else just to like prove to these guys that like I could still do the work.
Yeah.
Like, and that was the other thing too, was that like I was so much more focused on my job after I had like externally come out of the closet or like internally come out of the closet because like I wasn't fixated on all that shit anymore. I wasn't like having these like internal dialogues with myself going like, oh god, everything's going to be different if I transition, da 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 da, oh my god, and like all this sort of scary stuff. Because once that was out and I was just living my life, I was like, okay, well that's like not there anymore. I don't have to worry about that. I can just sort of focus on moving forward. And I did. And I think I was a much better camera person because of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were a much better camera person.
Oh, I think so, yeah. Because at that point, I could just lock in. Like, there was no longer any sort of, you know, questions or what ifs or should I's or anything like that. I was just living my life. Like, you know, like the way cis people get to do it. And it was actually the cast on that show were incredible. And because it was a very like female focused show, in the first seasons anyways, I don't know what they're up to these days, but it was very much a like the show was about a town of women who came together and like it was a period piece, so it was the early 1900s. And it was like that in real life. Like they were really supportive of me, and I'll never forget the time when we had like one of the few female dolly grips in town, and I was going to one of the washroom trailers, and just by default I was heading to the men's, and she's going to the other one, and she goes, "Sharky, you're going to the wrong washroom." And like all these bathroom bills and shit like that that's going on right now is like so invalidating. And like, so I feel very lucky to have had that experience, personally.
You said like after kind of coming out, you became a better camera person. And I would say kind of the same thing. Like in my journey, which I have like a documentary about, when I was in China doing a documentary with my film professor, I came out to him and whatnot, and he's like, wow, that's, you know, I've known trans students before, but never someone who's like going through it. But he's like, hey, maybe it'll, you know, it could make your art better. And
because you suffer for art.
Yeah, you suffer for art. But like, it's absolutely true. After, like, even as difficult as it can be, and even as much like doubt as there can be around it, once you start to get closer to kind of living as your authentic self, you're so much more in touch with your emotions, in touch with the world around you, that I think my art has absolutely improved. Like the thing I'm most proud of is that documentary about my transition. That's so like raw and emotional, and I used to not be able to tap into kind of any of that before.
Yeah, one of the things, and I feel like I've talked to other trans girls who have had this as a common experience, and no trans person is monolithic. No one person speaks for us all. Yeah. I'm looking at you, Caitlyn Jenner, but like I can definitely agree with that, because I remember as like before transition, my emotions were so static, and like it felt like a lot of times like I'd sort of be here emotionally until I wasn't, and suddenly I'd be super heightened emotions or super like flat emotions. Like I didn't know how to deal with them because that happens so infrequently that it's like, well, this isn't my default. This is weird. I don't like this. How do I deal with this? And I found that with estrogen and with hormone therapy, like my emotions were kind of always in fluctuation. Mm-hmm. And so you start to sort of deal with it in waves, because like you have this sort of more gradual adjustment, and you can sort of feel things better and know what's coming a little bit better. And for me, that was also really validating because it's like, oh, this feels better for me. Like, this feels better for how my brain functions. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's so, like, I think it took a long time for me to kind of adjust to that. Like, I thought, because there's, no trans person's a monolith, but I think, especially nowadays, the experience is so accessible through the internet. There's certain, like, expectations. I'd always, like, wanted to be able to cry, but I did not experience that at first on estrogen, although it kind of still heightens other senses. It was until recently where I've really been able to do that, and now I feel like my emotions are in a much better place where it's like it's constantly fluctuating, but you can kind of like just enjoy the ride now instead of just being like all like being caged up in a box all the time.
I think there's also something to be said about like the being there's a term for this, socialized. There we go. Like being socialized male, you're really taught that you can't have those experiences. And I feel like if you're a trans person who's grappling with your gender anyways and also grappling with how you've been socialized, like it's like extra hard.
Yeah.
So, I have a question for both of you. So, what's a misconception people often make about you, and what's the truth?
Back when I first came out, I feel like people expected me to like rock up on set in full drag, like with a beehive hairdo and like the full like clown drag makeup. I don't think people back then in like the early 2010s had really experienced trans people before. And I feel like for my part, apart from like guys being really weird about it and thinking that it was a purely like sexual thing, which is still common today, but like I think that they sort of thought that it was a fetish that had escaped the bedroom. Like, yeah, like people, I think they were only used to seeing trans people like as drag. Like they never really encountered, like I'm sure that they had probably met trans people but not known that they were trans. Because I feel like nowadays people just have much more opinions about us. Like I've met a bunch of people who had never met a trans person before, and so they would like ask insensitive questions or like questions about my junk, like just straight to my face, which is like, it's weird, but I was also kind of okay with answering those things because at the time I was also like the first trans person I'd met. So like I didn't really have a wealth of experiences to pull from. And I remember having a conversation with my grandma, who's no longer around, but she said something like, she pulled me aside in the hallway one day when she was visiting, and she said something like, well, what happens if you wake up one day and you realize that you can't take it off? And I remember sitting there kind of thoughtfully going over the question, and I remember saying to her, like, but that's the problem, is that right now it feels like I wake up every day and I have to put on a boy, and I don't want to have to put it on anymore. And I think that resonated with her. And unfortunately, she was kind of heavy in dementia at that point anyways, so I don't know if that answer stuck with her. But that's kind of the best way I can put it. Like, at least when people thought about it that way back then. Like, it was like I was trying to permanently install drag.
What would you say your perspective of how things are right now?
It really depends on who you talk to, I think. There's kind of, and we could talk more about politics later because I think I have a bit of a unique perspective on that. But like across political lines, I think people don't realize, especially with how like polarized or how seemingly obvious the debate is about like sports and stuff, that your strength is really, really affected by hormones. And if you like, even in class where there's like lovely supporting people, thankfully, for I would say most of the class, people, especially girls, will still like ask me like, hey, can you untighten this like C stand or whatever that somebody tightened way too much, and I'm like, no, sorry, I'm not. Believe me, I am not stronger than you. I'm probably weaker, because that like testosterone especially is a hell of a drug, and when you lose it, you lose muscle mass really quickly, and you can't do the things that you used to be able to do without thinking of it.
Um, yeah, and to add on to that, I remember when like I was going to the endocrinologist fairly regularly, early transition, and like because trans girls are on testosterone blockers, a lot of times our T levels are lower than cis women.
Yeah.
Because like human bodies produce both hormones, and like when you are replacing one with the other, you take that testosterone out completely. Like there, a lot of cis women will have a higher T level.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember trying to move like a big lens early on in my transition, and I remember going to pull it out and just sort of like it doesn't move, right? And I think that was one of the moments where I realized, like with camera girls and with like women grips and stuff like that, like I mean they've got the muscle mass anyways from working out and stuff, but I was like, well, that's why a lot of times women work smarter, not harder, because they can't just mindlessly do those tasks.
Yeah.
And that's not to discount women who can, because like there are some really tough girls out there, very hot.
And like I feel like I've noticed it the most oddly with the frequency of pushing on a door and thinking it's locked when it actually is just heavy has like skyrocketed. It's and it does have an effect of like, oh well, I guess I just have to be like stronger now, or just like work harder. And for while I was transitioning, but before I lost all time because of film school, I was doing kickboxing to kind of, because I think before coming out as trans or before realizing that, I think a lot of people relate to having a like hyper masculine phase, or like going to the gym a lot and doing just straight up boxing and doing like trying to get strong, but like without really having a goal, or without it, I was healthier, which was an improvement, but not necessarily like happier.
Oh yeah.
But now, with kickboxing, it can be like, and getting stronger, but in like a female way is can be pretty affirming.
Yeah, no, I had not even thought of that. I remember there was a time where, like, when I was between shows, I was, like, out bike riding every single day just to, like, get my cardio. But I was going way too hard about it. And, like, this is in my early 20s, so I could do it. But, like, also in hindsight, like, I was biking around Stanley Park trying to race cars and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't know if that's a healthy way of doing it. Yeah.
So, I want to know if you agree with this or not, but I feel like people often want to define trans creators only by their identity. So, I wanna hear your perspective on that. So, in a way, we can either agree on a middle point for that, or remind people and yourself that perhaps you're not just your identity, but you're also an artist.
That's a interesting one, because I feel like we as trans people haven't even really had the chance to tell our own stories enough. Like a lot of times, like this happened more a few years ago, but like, a lot of times cis people get cast in trans roles, or like cis people are telling trans stories, and like to a certain degree I feel like we do kind of need to, as trans people, tell our own stories. I think we're really in a point of time right now where we need to be seen as human. Which is like the worst thing I can possibly say, but it's also so true. Like, I wrote a script not too long ago, and it was like a time travel mystery sort of thing. And it had some sci-fi elements. It had a lot of heart, and at the core of it, I really wanted it to be a love story. And I had to sort of play into the gender element of it a little bit. Not because I think that that's the only story I'm capable of telling, and not because, I also want to see the visibility and the representation out there, but because I wanted to tell a story that anyone could see and relate to, and also, again, see us as human beings. Like, I have a lot more ideas, and I can, like, I don't think that any of who I am as a trans person comes across in, like, if you watch The Flash, for instance, or like the feature I shot last year, Brother. There's not a lot of gender questions in that, but I think that my work comes through not necessarily just through my experience, like just telling a gender diverse story, but my experience as a gender diverse person and what I've gone through gives me a very deep range of emotions that I'm able to access as a camera person. And I really like to put myself in the shoes of the actors and of the characters in those moments, so I can try and sort of, as the audience, be in the same headspace as them. So I think, if anything, trans people have a very diverse range of emotions that we can bring into a lot of different projects. And yeah, I think unfortunately right now we have to tell our stories because no one else wants to hear them.
It's very, like, on the surface level, there is a criticism of, you don't want to, like, oh, why do you make being trans your whole personality? Or like, I'm fine with gay people, just not the people who make it their whole thing.
Yeah.
And if the world was a certain way, I could see myself being like, okay, yeah, I'm very fixated on trans stories right now, because, like, I'm still, I'm barely more than a year in, and I've, like, very much going through that, and in a few years it'll be a smaller part of my identity as I discover more things, now that I can be my authentic self, now that I can kind of live an authentic experience and, like, learn more about what I actually like. But right now we're kind of in a battle for survival. That, like, in Canada, I'm not sure how many people realize how, like, close things are everywhere to kind of falling off that precipice that, unfortunately, my country, that I'll probably have to come back to very soon, has gone. And also, I don't think people on the left, who are generally more supportive of trans people, realize how well controlled the kind of conservative apparatus is around the representation of trans people. Because growing up as a conservative and being a conservative in high school and a little bit early college, I had never seen in my life there's a concept for a lot of trans people called passing, which is the idea, problematic or not, of being indistinguishable from a cis person, or at least, people assuming you're cis when they meet you or when they see you online. And that can be a standard of, like, you fit into gender norms well enough to look like that or whatnot. But growing up with conservative media, like, you hear about trans people, you see them, you will never see a passing trans person. You will never see a, traditional beauty standards meeting trans person. And there's a lot of, like, hot and sexy trans people out there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that do pass or do meet traditional beauty standards, or who look great despite that. But it's so controlled to the purpose of completely, getting rid of us.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about that because, like, back when I first came out, there was a lot of pressure to sort of be passing, and I think part of that is like pre 2016, pre Laverne Cox walking on the cover of Time magazine. Like, there was a lot of pressure to blend in, and I think part of that was because like trans culture's always been there, passing or not, but like there was a lot of effort back then to not ever bring it to the forefront and not really ever let people know that it was there. So for a while there, it felt like things were going really well and it felt like we were safe. And I feel like that's why a lot of people really like started to come out. That's why numbers started shooting out because people felt safe for a while. And that's why, you know, the rubber band effect happens and suddenly people push back on that. They don't want to see that anymore. And they kind of try and spin the narrative of like, oh, these people were never around to begin with. This is a new thing and we want to quash it. When really we've always been there. We just started showing our faces more.
Yeah. As like a student of history and as someone who's like thought a lot about this, I think there's a real because like I never had anything against trans people despite the best efforts of kind of conservative media and whatnot. I just didn't know like that you could transition and be happy and have it work out and whatnot. And the first like passing trans person I ever saw, I had to meet in person at she was a student at my school in my directing class and was a great person and not just a veteran but like a combat veteran, and you know I liked military history a lot and I really respected that, so kind of inoculated me against it. And I feel we're at a narrow window in history where because if you see statistics of who does and does not support trans rights, it's almost exactly who does and does not know a trans person in person. So there is a closing window to put the genie back in the bottle in terms of public representation of trans people and trans rights that I think a lot of like conservatives or far right people want to close in on right now, because if they don't, there will be too many people that know trans people personally for their propaganda to work. And so they very carefully do not show trans people. They fearmonger about them. They do not want you to see them, and they want to force you back in the closet so that they don't so that their issue does not grow out of hand.
Yeah, that's interesting because like I felt back then a lot of the people who took the most exception with me when I first came out were people who had never met a trans person before, and I was the first one they'd ever met. So a lot of the questions that were insensitive were kind of just because they'd never met someone like that before. They kind of assumed that it was something that happened to other people. So yeah, that's interesting, and I guess that's the contrast of like me coming from a world where people hadn't seen trans people and they weren't represented and they weren't talked about, versus the same thing except now everyone's got an opinion about it and it's been politicized. Release the Epstein files.
This is a question for the both of you. So what would you say is a dream that you have that maybe even scares you a little bit, but you feel ready to say that?
I feel like for me, back when I first came out, it would be a lot different than now. Because for me now, 12 or 13 years later, like, I don't really think about my transition that much anymore. Like, I definitely get days where I have gender dysphoria or euphoria. But it feels a lot different than when I was a lot more fixated on it, when I was, like, sort of freshly out of the closet. And I know that back then, I used to really, really be, like, I really wanted to, like, pass. And I agree that that's sort of a problematic way of looking at things, because it sort of erases your trans identity. But at the same time, it was one of those things where I was like, I just want to be able to live my life. I don't want to have this to be a thing all the time, which, I grew to live with that as well and love it to a certain degree too. But like on the last show I worked on, I was talking with one of the costumers and I made some joke about being trans. And she came up to me afterwards and she's like, I didn't even know you were trans. I thought you were just a tall lesbian. And I was like, ha, awesome. And it's so funny that like when I really gave up on trying to pass and really gave up on like trying to be what society perceives as feminine, like my own femininity kind of just came out. And in being myself, I feel like I pass more often now. Now that I don't really give a shit and I look like your weird gay aunt. So like but yeah, I mean my sort of dream now has more to do with my ambitions as a filmmaker. Like, I would really like for this feature that I've shot to take off and to do more movies. Like that's sort of the dream for me.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, for both like a filmmaking dream and to speak somewhat to the pressure to pass, I feel like there's nowadays there's so much more. It's even though like media and especially like YouTube and social media algorithms really silo you into your side and will only show you that. Once you break through, there's so much like trans content on the internet now. It's almost overwhelming, and that now, I don't know what it was like before, but it certainly feels like there's a checklist you've got to hit, or you've got to
really?
do all these sorts of things, and I feel a little self-conscious that I'm not like where I want to be in transition yet, or where I feel like I should be in after 1 year or whatnot. And although I can comprehend a way to give this advice for others, it's harder to accept it for myself. But like, you really shouldn't be I mean, passing is not a goal that I would take away from anyone. I don't think it's problematic to want to or to look to pass, especially if it's a safety thing, as
Especially if it's a
becoming
safety thing,
now. But like, take the pressure off of yourself from other sources, from trans influencers, from whatever you're seeing online, or people even you meet. Although people I meet have not told me the same things of, no one's ever tried to make me self-conscious about my transition who is a trans person. You have to take your time with it, and that's going to be different depending on the person, to kind of explore and find who you are. And now that I'm in a place where it's safe to explore, I unfortunately don't have any time to do that. So I've gotten the, a finger on the monkey's paw curls, and
I think that's the best time though, because I feel like when you're not fixated, and like definitely there are times to fixate on things, like when you want to think about your presentation and stuff like that moving forward, like it's good to take that time. But like honestly, when you're so busy that you can't think about it, I feel like that's sort of when you're at your most genuine self anyways.
Yeah, and I'm trying to kind of be more comfortable with that and take it a step at a time. But like, my dream in the intersection of those things is, I mentioned this briefly, I'd love to interview Madeline Thorson from Extremely OK Games. I want to do that. Probably won't be able to, but it would be cool.
We're putting it up to the universe here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just going forward, I want to like become a better artist and continue to be genuine in my expression and my art.
That's so crazy. I had never, like, back in my day, like, there was no blueprint, there was no roadmap for like coming out of the closet. Like I went and did like there was a support group that was going on downtown, and I bet there were resources like if I had looked online, but I remember sort of being too scared to at the time. And the idea of trans influencers like setting goalposts and stuff like that is fucking crazy to me because part of my transition was a liberation from all of that. It was a liberation from like getting away from the masculine goalposts that society set for me. And after having like a hyper feminine phase, also to a degree, it was getting away from the goalposts that society sets for women as well, and finding myself somewhere in between. Because like I identify as someone who's gender fluid, although my gender from day to day kind of varies a lot, but like I'm still always she her, and yeah. So to a degree, it was also a liberation from what society views as feminine, and to think that people are putting themselves into these like narrow-minded paths the same way that cis people do, that's awful, that's sad. That makes me so sad to hear, but in the same way it makes me happy that like that there's representation.
Yeah. I wouldn't take that as a... Maybe there's a valid critique there, but I wouldn't say that, like, trans influencers generally put people in boxes or have a certain set of expectations. The same people who I feel... I'm like, oh, there's now an expectation for the first year, say the same thing that you just said of like, it's getting out of boxes, it's taking your own time with it, it's whatnot. It's me more, it says more about me than the internet of just like taking things too or being too hard on myself or whatnot, or taking certain jokes as real goalposts than they actually are. And like it's important to kind of stay grounded with find trans community if you can, which took me for basically until now to have in-person trans friends, but also stay in touch with affirming cis people and like give yourself the space you need, be kind to yourself, because that's the whole point.
Yeah, that's why you do it in the first place. Okay. Yeah, okay, well that's a little less scary than I originally thought.
No.
I guess that would also be, yeah, okay. I guess that's more about the person receiving it than the person putting it out into the world.
Yeah, and just the general effect of social media. I think all...
That's true.
Like, women probably feel the same, even like...
Oh, absolutely,
even men that are like, have body dysmorphia because of social media and stuff. It's, no matter who you are, even if you have like influencers who say nice things, it's still like puts an expectation on you that's unfair.
Oh god, it's true. And I remember like my girlfriends back when I was in early transition, I would say something about like, whatever, oh, this doesn't fit me right or that or whatever, and their reaction would be just like, welcome to being a woman. Yeah.
Okay, so there's one final question. I would like to know, what do you think would be the most important advice you can give to young filmmakers today?
The film industry does not look anything like the way it used to, especially back when I started. Back then, there were really strict distribution models between like network television or theatrical releases, and there's so many more avenues right now that I think that there are so many valid ways to be a filmmaker through independent distribution, through YouTube. Like, cut a new path. That's what I would say. If you can get those things that go through traditional media outlets, fantastic, good for you. But I think that there's no harm in exploring other avenues and no harm in finding new ways to get your stories out there.
I'd say, even just for my like much shorter experience, like, be kind, be like, always, that's if you can't be kind from a place of empathy, then at least from a place of your own like opportunity. Be kind, because that's what people remember. You don't know when you're gonna work with people again, or how your reputation's gonna carry you, but just
That's so true. And like, people are a lot more willing to bring their best collaborative selves to someone when they believe in that person's vision and they want to work with that person, rather than trudging out into the wilderness for yet another day for this goddamn asshole. And film is such a collaborative undertaking, and sometimes it's not the right time to bring everyone's ideas forward, but sometimes there are times to let everyone's idea come forward, and sometimes you can make some really beautiful things out of that.
Micah, thank you so much for sharing your craft and your heart with us today. We are very grateful for your time and everything that you did for us today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, Julian, for preparing such good questions and being so curious.
Hell yeah.
Willing to do this.
Yeah. Not often that cis people are the minority in the room.
Well, this is how it feels all the time.